The room went silent the moment he walked in, and the man who thought he had won everything nearly dropped the glass in his hand. 3 days before that moment, nobody would have believed a single name could change the atmosphere inside a ballroom worth millions of dollars. The Grand Crescent Hotel glowed against the downtown skyline like a crown of gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors while a string quartet played softly near a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays filled with champagne. Laughter floated through the air. Expensive watches flashed beneath designer suit sleeves. It was the kind of engagement party people posted online just to prove they had been invited. Ryan Holloway stood at the center of it all. Tall, confident, and smiling for every camera pointed his way, he looked exactly like a man convinced life had rewarded him. Beside him stood Vanessa Reed, his fiancée. Her diamond ring caught the light every time she lifted her hand. Guests admired it openly. Ryan enjoyed every second of their attention. He had spent months planning this night, making sure every detail looked perfect. Every flower arrangement. Every bottle of champagne. Every guest list decision. Especially one particular invitation. Across the ballroom, conversations began slowing. Heads turned toward the entrance. Ryan followed their gaze. At first, his smile only widened. Claire Bennett had arrived. She stood just inside the doorway wearing a simple midnight blue dress that carried elegance without demanding attention. Her blonde hair rested neatly on her shoulders. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. That almost bothered Ryan more than if she had. Years ago, Claire had been his wife. Years ago, she had believed they would grow old together. Tonight, she was simply another guest watching him celebrate his future with someone else. Ryan felt a familiar sense of satisfaction. This was exactly why he had invited her. Not for closure. Not for friendship. Certainly not for kindness. He wanted her to see what he had become. He wanted her to witness the life he believed she had lost. Around the room, a few guests exchanged curious glances. Some recognized Claire immediately. Others only knew pieces of the story. Divorces always left behind rumors. Yet Claire remained calm. She accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and quietly moved through the crowd. No anger. No bitterness. No dramatic reaction. Ryan almost seemed disappointed by her composure. Then someone noticed the man walking beside her. He wasn't dressed like a celebrity. His dark suit was perfectly tailored but understated. No flashy jewelry. No entourage. No attempt to command attention. He simply walked beside Claire with the relaxed confidence of someone who never needed to prove anything. Most guests barely looked twice before returning their attention to Ryan and Vanessa. But near the back of the ballroom, one older businessman froze. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, he looked as though he had seen a ghost. He quickly set down his drink and stared again. The color drained slightly from his face. Across the room, Ryan continued smiling, completely unaware. He didn't notice the businessman beginning to move through the crowd. He didn't notice several executives suddenly whispering to one another. He didn't notice the subtle shift spreading through the ballroom like the first distant rumble before a storm. Because at that moment, Ryan Holloway still believed this night belonged to him. 72 hours earlier, the invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Claire Bennett almost threw it away without opening it. The envelope was thick, expensive, and addressed in elegant silver lettering. It sat among utility bills and grocery coupons on her kitchen counter while sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor of her apartment. For nearly an hour, she ignored it. She made coffee. Answered emails. Watered the small herb garden near her window. Yet the envelope remained there, waiting. Eventually, curiosity won. Claire slid a finger beneath the seal and unfolded the card inside. The heavy paper felt cold in her hands. Ryan Holloway and Vanessa Reed request the honor of your presence at their engagement celebration. Claire stared at the words for several seconds. Not because she was heartbroken. Those wounds had healed long ago. What surprised her was the audacity. Ryan had not spoken to her in almost 2 years. No holiday messages. No friendly check-ins. Nothing. Yet suddenly he wanted her at the most important social event of his year. A faint smile appeared on her face. She knew Ryan too well. This invitation was not an act of kindness. It was a performance. A stage. An audience. And somehow, he wanted her seated in the front row. Claire placed the card back on the counter and walked toward the window overlooking the street below. Outside, ordinary life moved forward. People carried shopping bags. A delivery truck stopped at the curb. Someone jogged past with a golden retriever. The simplicity of it all felt strangely comforting. Years ago, she would have spent hours wondering why Ryan did what he did. Back then she searched for explanations. She searched for fairness. But time had taught her something important. Closure rarely arrived from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it arrived quietly while you were busy rebuilding your life. Ryan had once been different. Before the promotions. Before the expensive suits. Before he started measuring success by the envy in other people's eyes. There had been nights when they shared takeout on a second-hand couch because money was tight. There had been mornings when they dreamed together about the future. Claire remembered believing those dreams belonged to both of them. Somewhere along the way, they stopped. Not all at once. The distance grew gradually, like a crack spreading through glass. More business dinners. More weekends away. More conversations ending with distracted nods and glances toward a glowing phone screen. Then eventually came Vanessa. Beautiful. Ambitious. Perfectly suited for the image Ryan wanted to project. By the time the marriage officially ended, Claire felt less shocked than exhausted. She folded the invitation and slipped it back into its envelope. Most people assumed divorce destroyed her. In truth, it forced her to discover who she was without someone else's approval. She built a quieter life. A better one. Not flashy. Not headline-worthy. Just real. As evening approached, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A message appeared on the screen. Hope your day is going well. Dinner tomorrow? Claire immediately recognized the sender. A warmth settled over her expression. She typed a short reply and set the phone down. Then her eyes drifted back toward the invitation one final time. For reasons she could not fully explain, she felt the story Ryan wanted to tell at that engagement party was not going to unfold the way he expected. The next evening, Claire arrived at a small Italian restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop on a quiet downtown street. Warm yellow light glowed through the windows. The smell of fresh bread drifted into the cool evening air each time the door opened. Inside, conversations blended with soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. It was not the kind of place people visited to be seen. It was the kind of place people chose when they wanted to enjoy the company sitting across from them. Claire spotted Alexander Hayes immediately. He was already seated near the window, reading something on his tablet while waiting. When he noticed her approaching, he stood and smiled. Not the polished smile of a salesman. Not the practiced grin of a politician. Just genuine warmth. The kind that made people feel comfortable. I ordered your favorite appetizer, he said as she sat down. Claire laughed softly. You assume you know my favorite. I know enough to take a reasonable guess. She shook her head, amused. Over the past several months, that had become one of Alexander's most remarkable qualities. He listened. Really listened. Small details that most people forgot somehow remained in his memory. The restaurant filled steadily as the evening continued. Couples celebrated birthdays. Families shared meals. Life unfolded quietly around them. For a while, neither mentioned the invitation. They talked about work projects, books they had recently read, and a community fundraiser Claire had been helping organize. Yet eventually Alexander noticed something. Every few minutes, Claire's eyes drifted toward her phone resting face down beside her plate. "Something is bothering you," he said. It was not a question. Claire sighed and reached into her purse. She slid the silver envelope across the table. Alexander opened it and read the invitation carefully. His expression remained unchanged. No surprise. No judgment. No immediate advice. He simply set the card down and folded his hands. "Do you want to go?" he asked. Claire stared at the candle flickering between them. "I honestly do not know." Alexander nodded. "Then why are you considering it?" The answer came faster than she expected. "Because I am tired of avoiding parts of my past." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside the window, headlights moved slowly through evening traffic. Finally Alexander leaned back in his chair. "Do you miss him?" Claire almost smiled. That question would have hurt once. Years ago, it might have kept her awake all night. Now the answer felt simple. "No," she said quietly. "Then maybe this is not about Ryan." Alexander's words lingered between them. Claire realized he was right. The invitation itself was not the problem. The problem was the version of herself Ryan expected to see. The woman who doubted her worth. The woman who measured her value through someone else's approval. That woman no longer existed. Dinner continued, but something had shifted inside her. The uncertainty that had followed her since opening the envelope began fading. By the time dessert arrived, she felt lighter. More certain. As they stepped outside later that evening, city lights reflected across the wet pavement from a brief afternoon rain. Alexander walked beside her in comfortable silence. Then, just before reaching her car, he stopped. "Whatever you decide," he said, "make sure the decision belongs to you." Claire looked at him beneath the glow of a nearby street lamp. There was no pressure in his voice. No attempt to influence her choice. Just respect. As she drove home, the invitation remained on the passenger seat beside her. For the first time since it arrived, it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a doorway. And somewhere across the city, Ryan Holloway was busy preparing a celebration he believed would prove how far he had risen, completely unaware that the person he expected to impress had already moved far beyond needing his validation. The following morning, Claire woke before sunrise. Pale orange light stretched across the ceiling as the city slowly came alive outside her apartment windows. For a few quiet moments, she remained still beneath the blankets, listening to the distant hum of traffic several stories below. The invitation sat on her nightstand where she had left it the night before. Yet something about it felt different now. It no longer carried the weight it once had. It was just paper. Just ink. Just an event. The fear attached to it had begun to disappear. After making coffee, Claire settled into her usual routine. She reviewed project proposals for the nonprofit organization where she worked, answered messages from volunteers, and prepared for a planning meeting later that morning. Her apartment was modest but welcoming. Shelves lined with books. Family photographs. Small plants thriving near every sunny corner. There was no luxury here. No extravagance. But there was peace. And peace had become something she valued more than appearances. Years earlier, when the divorce became final, she remembered how many people expected her to fall apart. Some offered sympathy with pity hidden beneath their smiles. Others quietly assumed she would spend years trying to recover from losing Ryan. What nobody understood was that losing him had eventually forced her to stop losing herself. The first year had been difficult. There were evenings when the silence felt overwhelming. There were weekends when loneliness arrived unexpectedly. She had learned how to assemble furniture by herself. Learned how to manage finances she once shared with someone else. Learned how to make decisions without seeking approval. Small victories accumulated one after another. Slowly, confidence returned. Then purpose returned. Then happiness followed. Around noon, Claire left for a community center on the east side of the city. Children played basketball in a nearby gymnasium while volunteers prepared supplies for an upcoming education program. The building was not impressive from the outside. The paint showed signs of age. The parking lot needed repairs. Yet inside, energy filled every room. Claire spent the afternoon helping coordinate scholarship applications and speaking with families. She knew many of them by name. Some greeted her with hugs. Others stopped her simply to say thank you. None of these moments appeared on social media. No cameras captured them. But they mattered. More than she could explain. As the day ended, Claire carried a box of donated books toward her car. A teenage volunteer named Sarah hurried over to help. "You always look happy," Sarah said. Claire laughed softly. "That is definitely not always true." "Maybe not always," Sarah replied, "but you seem like someone who figured things out." The comment stayed with Claire long after she drove away. Because the truth was simpler. She had not figured everything out. She still made mistakes. She still had doubts. The difference was that her life no longer revolved around proving her worth to anyone else. Later that evening, she stopped at a grocery store and picked up ingredients for dinner. Ordinary errands. Ordinary moments. Yet as she pushed her cart down the aisle, her phone vibrated with a new message. She glanced at the screen. It was from Alexander. "Hope your day was productive. Also, I found a place that serves the best key lime pie in the city. We may need to investigate." Claire smiled before she could stop herself. Nearby shoppers continued comparing cereal brands and reading ingredient labels, completely unaware that a simple message had brightened her entire evening. She slipped the phone back into her purse and continued shopping. Somewhere across town, preparations for the engagement party continued. Decorations were being finalized. Guest confirmations were arriving. Ryan was building a night designed to impress hundreds of people. Meanwhile, Claire was building something far less visible and infinitely more valuable, a life she genuinely loved living. 2 days remained before the engagement party. The city moved through another busy afternoon beneath clear blue skies while Claire sat on a bench outside the community center, reviewing notes for an upcoming project. Children laughed somewhere across the courtyard. A delivery truck backed into a loading zone. The ordinary sounds of life blended together in a way she had come to appreciate. Her phone buzzed. A message from Alexander appeared on the screen. "Coffee in 15 minutes. I am nearby." Claire smiled and replied yes. 20 minutes later they sat at a small outdoor cafe shaded by striped umbrellas. The place was crowded with office workers escaping their desks during lunch breaks. People hurried past carrying briefcases and paper cups. Nobody paid attention to Alexander, which seemed perfectly fine with him. He wore a simple navy button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. No designer logos. No flashy accessories. Nothing that demanded attention. Yet there was something unusual about him. Not confidence exactly. More like certainty. The kind of calm presence people developed when they no longer needed to prove themselves. Claire had noticed it from the beginning. Their conversation drifted naturally from one topic to another. Volunteer programs. Travel destinations. Books stacked on their nightstands waiting to be read. With Alexander, silence never felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. At one point, a server accidentally dropped a tray near their table. Glasses rattled loudly across the pavement. Several customers looked annoyed. Alexander immediately stood and helped gather the fallen items before the embarrassed server could even ask for assistance. Then he returned to his seat and continued the conversation as though nothing unusual had happened. Claire watched him carefully. It was a small moment. Most people would forget it within minutes. Yet she found herself thinking about it long afterward. Character often revealed itself through details no one expected others to notice. Later that afternoon, Alexander excused himself to answer a phone call. He stepped away toward the opposite end of the patio. Claire looked down at her coffee while waiting. A few minutes passed. Then something strange happened. The manager of the cafe suddenly appeared near Alexander. His posture changed immediately. Respect replaced casual friendliness. Another employee joined them. Then another. All seemed eager to greet him. Claire could not hear the conversation, but she noticed the expressions. Admiration. Recognition. Surprise. When Alexander returned, he carried the same relaxed smile as before. "Everything okay?" Claire asked. "Just work," he replied. The answer seemed honest, yet incomplete. Claire considered asking more questions but decided against it. Whatever story Alexander carried, he had never used it to impress her. In a world where people constantly advertised their achievements, there was something refreshing about that. As evening approached, they walked several blocks together through downtown streets illuminated by the golden light of sunset. Storefront windows reflected orange and pink across the sidewalks. Near an intersection, they paused beside a fountain. "Have you decided?" Alexander asked. Claire knew exactly what he meant. She nodded slowly. "I am going." He studied her expression for a moment. "Good. You think so?" "I think avoiding something gives it power. Walking through it takes the power away." Claire looked at the water flowing through the fountain basin. For the first time, she realized she was no longer nervous about the event itself. Curious, perhaps. But not afraid. As they continued walking, neither noticed a luxury sedan parked across the street. Inside sat a businessman speaking on his phone. His conversation stopped abruptly when he glanced through the window and recognized Alexander. The man's eyes widened. He lowered the phone and stared. Meanwhile, Alexander and Claire disappeared into the evening crowd completely unaware that some people knew exactly who he was, and that very soon, many more would. The morning of the engagement party arrived with clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made the city feel freshly polished. Claire stood in front of her bedroom window holding a cup of coffee while sunlight stretched across the buildings outside. The invitation rested on the dresser nearby. By this point, she had read it enough times to memorize every word. Yet surprisingly, she felt calm. Not excited. Not anxious. Just calm. The day ahead no longer felt like a confrontation. It felt like a chapter. She was ready to close. Her phone vibrated shortly after 9 o'clock. A simple message appeared. "Lunch at noon. Then we get ready for tonight. Alexander." Claire smiled. Somehow he always seemed to know exactly when she needed reassurance without making it obvious. By noon they were seated at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the river. Boats moved slowly across the water while sunlight reflected from nearby glass towers. Around them, business executives discussed deals over expensive meals. Tourists snapped photographs of the skyline. The city felt alive. Alexander listened while Claire described her morning. He never interrupted. Never rushed her thoughts. When she finally admitted she was still wondering why Ryan had invited her, Alexander set down his fork and considered the question. "Maybe he wants an audience," he said. "Or maybe he wants validation." Claire looked across the table. "You think people really do that?" Alexander smiled slightly. "More often than you think." The answer lingered in her mind. Because if Ryan wanted validation, he had chosen the wrong person. Years ago she might have given it to him. Years ago she might have attended hoping to understand his decisions or somehow rewrite the ending of their marriage. But not now. Not anymore. After lunch they walked through downtown streets lined with trees turning shades of gold and amber. Eventually they reached a boutique where Claire had arranged a fitting earlier that week. The dress waiting for her was elegant without being extravagant. Midnight blue. Clean lines. Timeless rather than trendy. When she stepped out of the fitting room, Alexander glanced up from a chair near the entrance. For a moment he simply looked at her. Then he smiled. "That is the one." Claire laughed. "You did not even pretend to consider the others." "There is no reason to pretend." The sales consultant standing nearby smiled knowingly. She had witnessed hundreds of couples over the years and recognized genuine admiration when she saw it. It was never loud. It never demanded attention. It simply existed. By late afternoon, Claire returned home to prepare for the evening. Soft music played through the apartment while she finished getting ready. Outside, the sky slowly darkened. City lights began appearing one by one beyond her windows. She fastened a small pair of earrings, smoothed the sleeve of her dress, and took one final look in the mirror. The reflection staring back at her looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Not because she had changed physically. Because she carried herself differently now. There was confidence where doubt once lived. Peace where uncertainty once lingered. A knock sounded at the door. Claire opened it to find Alexander standing in the hallway. He wore a dark charcoal suit that fit perfectly. As always, nothing about him seemed designed to impress anyone. Yet somehow he looked effortlessly distinguished. "Ready?" he asked. Claire glanced once more toward the apartment she had built for herself, the life she had rebuilt piece by piece, and then back toward him. "Ready." Together they walked toward the elevator, completely unaware that across the city, guests were already gathering beneath crystal chandeliers while Ryan Holloway prepared to enjoy what he believed would be the most satisfying night of his life. The ballroom was already glowing when Claire and Alexander arrived. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished marble floors while a live quartet played near the grand staircase. Conversations floated through the air alongside the soft clink of champagne glasses. Every detail had been designed to impress. Every flower arrangement stood perfectly placed. Every table shimmered beneath carefully chosen lighting. It was the kind of event that encouraged people to compare success stories before they even introduced themselves. As Claire stepped inside, a few nearby conversations paused. Recognition traveled quickly through the room. Some guests remembered her from years earlier. Others knew only fragments of the story. Either way, curiosity followed her entrance. Claire noticed the looks but did not react. She simply accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and continued forward. Beside her, Alexander appeared completely unaffected by the attention. His calm presence remained unchanged. Across the ballroom, Ryan spotted them almost immediately. A satisfied smile crossed his face. This was the moment he had anticipated for weeks. He excused himself from a group of guests and walked toward them with Vanessa at his side. Vanessa looked flawless beneath the ballroom lights. Her engagement ring sparkled whenever she moved her hand, and she made certain people noticed. "Claire," Ryan said warmly, though the warmth felt carefully rehearsed. "I am glad you came." Claire returned a polite smile. "Thank you for inviting me." Ryan glanced briefly toward Alexander. "And you brought company." "This is Alexander," Claire said. The two men shook hands. Ryan offered the confident grip of someone accustomed to establishing dominance. Alexander responded with relaxed ease. Neither seemed impressed by the other. At least on the surface. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "It is nice to meet you, Alexander. What do you do?" The question sounded innocent enough, but Claire recognized the familiar social game hidden beneath it. People at events like this rarely asked what someone did out of genuine curiosity. They asked to measure status. Alexander smiled politely. "I work with businesses." Vanessa waited for more details. None came. Ryan chuckled lightly. "That narrows it down." "I suppose it does," Alexander replied. The answer ended there. No job title. No achievements. No explanation. Ryan seemed amused. Vanessa looked slightly disappointed. Claire nearly smiled. Throughout the evening, Ryan continued making rounds through the ballroom. He greeted investors, colleagues, and industry contacts while Vanessa remained close beside him. Together they looked like the image of success they wanted the world to see. Every few minutes, someone complimented the ring. Every few minutes, Ryan repeated another version of the same story about their future plans. Meanwhile, Claire and Alexander remained near the edge of the crowd. They spoke with a few guests, enjoyed the music, and observed the celebration without trying to become part of it. Yet something unusual began happening. Certain people who noticed Alexander reacted strangely. A man in an expensive suit paused mid-conversation after spotting him. A woman from another side of the room stared twice before whispering something to her husband. An executive carrying a champagne glass appeared ready to approach before suddenly changing direction. Claire noticed these reactions but could not fully understand them. Across the ballroom, Ryan remained focused on enjoying his moment. He saw only what he expected to see. His former wife standing quietly among the guests. A companion who seemed ordinary. A celebration unfolding exactly as planned. What he failed to notice was that the atmosphere around Alexander was changing little by little. Like distant thunder before a storm, recognition was spreading through the room, and with every passing minute, the night was moving further away from Ryan's control. The turning point arrived so quietly that most guests missed it at first. Near the center of the ballroom, Ryan was finishing another conversation about future business opportunities while Vanessa admired her engagement ring beneath the chandelier light. Around them, music continued playing and servers moved between tables carrying trays of champagne. Everything still appeared perfectly controlled. Then an older gentleman entered through a side doorway. Several guests recognized him immediately. Thomas Whitaker was known throughout the city as one of the most influential investors in the region. His arrival attracted attention wherever he went. Conversations softened as people noticed him crossing the ballroom. Ryan straightened his jacket. Even he seemed interested in making a favorable impression. Yet instead of approaching the engaged couple, Thomas continued walking directly past them. His destination was clear. He was heading toward Claire and Alexander. A few people exchanged confused looks. Ryan followed Thomas with his eyes. So did Vanessa. Thomas stopped in front of Alexander and broke into a genuine smile. "Alexander," he said warmly. "I was hoping I would run into you before you disappeared again." The surrounding conversation seemed to pause all at once. Alexander stood and shook his hand. "Good to see you, Thomas." The investor laughed. "Good to see me. Half the business community has been trying to schedule meetings with you for months." A ripple of curiosity spread through nearby groups. Heads turned. More people started paying attention. Claire noticed it immediately. Alexander, however, remained completely composed. Thomas then looked toward Claire. "And you must be Claire. I have heard wonderful things about you." Claire smiled politely, surprised. Before she could respond, another guest approached. Then another. A woman who managed a national charitable foundation. A technology executive. A real estate developer. One by one they arrived. Each greeted Alexander with unmistakable respect. Some thanked him for previous advice. Others referenced projects he had supported. The crowd surrounding them gradually expanded. Across the room, Ryan's smile began fading. Vanessa looked puzzled. "Who exactly is he?" she asked quietly. Ryan did not answer. He was too busy listening. Finally, someone in the growing circle spoke the words that changed everything. "I still cannot believe you acquired 3 companies last quarter and kept it out of the headlines," a businessman said with admiration. "Most people in your position would want publicity." Another guest laughed. "Alexander has never cared about publicity. That is why Hayes Global keeps outperforming everyone." The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. Hayes Global. Several people nearby immediately recognized it. The multinational investment group appeared regularly in financial publications. Its holdings stretched across industries. Its influence reached far beyond the city. Vanessa's expression froze. Ryan's face lost color. He knew that name. More importantly, he knew what it meant. Months earlier, his company had been pursuing a partnership connected to one of Hayes Global's subsidiaries. Senior executives discussed the organization constantly. Entire departments monitored its market decisions. And standing beside Claire was not an employee. Not a consultant. Not a middle manager. He was Alexander Hayes himself. Founder. Chairman. Billionaire. The realization moved through the ballroom with astonishing speed. Suddenly countless strange moments made sense. The whispers. The stares. The reactions from certain guests. Ryan stood motionless as the truth settled over the room. The man he had dismissed as ordinary possessed more influence than anyone present. Yet the most remarkable part was not Alexander's wealth. It was the fact that he had never mentioned it once. While others spent the evening displaying status, Alexander had quietly carried his without needing anyone's approval. And for the first time that night, Ryan Holloway understood that the story he believed he was writing had never truly belonged to him. For several seconds after the revelation, the ballroom seemed suspended in time. The music continued. Glasses still clinked softly in the background. Yet the energy inside the room had changed completely. Conversations shifted direction. Attention moved away from the engagement celebration and toward the small group gathered around Claire and Alexander. Ryan remained frozen where he stood. Across from him, guests who had spent the evening trying to impress one another were now competing for a chance to exchange a few words with the man they had previously ignored. It was not subtle. It was not gradual. It happened all at once. Vanessa forced a smile, though it no longer appeared effortless. She glanced around the room and noticed something she had not expected. People were no longer looking at her ring. They were no longer admiring the carefully planned image she and Ryan had spent months constructing. Their attention had shifted elsewhere. Meanwhile, Claire stood quietly beside Alexander. She accepted congratulations she had never asked for and smiles she had never tried to earn. Yet through it all, her expression remained unchanged. She did not look victorious. She did not look smug. If anything, she looked peaceful. That difference mattered. Because this was never the outcome she came to create. A few minutes later, Ryan finally crossed the ballroom. The confidence that had carried him through most of the evening seemed noticeably smaller now. When he reached Claire, he hesitated before speaking. "Claire," he said softly. She turned toward him. "Ryan." For a moment, neither continued. Years of history existed between those two simple words. Regrets. Memories. Lessons. Finally Ryan glanced toward Alexander before returning his attention to Claire. "I did not know." Claire understood exactly what he meant. She offered a gentle smile. "No. You did not." The answer contained no anger. No accusation. Somehow that made it more powerful. Ryan looked away briefly. For the first time all evening, he seemed uncertain. Throughout his life, he had measured success through comparisons. Better job. Better house. Better status. Better image. Yet standing there now, he realized something uncomfortable. Claire had stopped playing that game long ago. That was why she appeared so calm. She had nothing left to prove. Across the ballroom, guests continued approaching Alexander. He greeted each person with the same humility he had shown all evening. No grand speeches. No dramatic displays. Just quiet confidence. Eventually Claire touched his arm lightly. "I think we should go." Alexander smiled. "I was hoping you would say that." Together they thanked their hosts and began walking toward the exit. As they crossed the ballroom, conversations softened around them. Not because people feared them. Because people respected them. There was a difference. Near the doorway, Claire paused briefly and looked back one final time. She saw Ryan standing beneath the chandeliers. She saw Vanessa beside him. She saw guests moving through the room. The scene looked exactly as it had when she arrived. Yet somehow everything felt different. Not because Ryan had changed. Not because the ballroom had changed. Because she had changed. The woman who once wondered whether she was enough had disappeared years ago. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and free. Claire turned away and stepped into the cool night air. The city lights stretched endlessly before her. Alexander walked beside her as they disappeared into the evening. Behind them, the celebration continued. Ahead of them, life continued too. And that was the real victory. She did not win him back. She did not need revenge. She did not need anyone's apology. She had already found something far more valuable. She had found herself.